Hey, this is Josh McCarver, and you're dropping into a conversation with Jerry Varnado, and we're going to hear him talk about his time in the tech industry and advice he gives veterans on how they can get their foot in the door.
All right. Jerry, great chat with you again. Super excited to kind of learn from you and with just your experience. But can you just tell me a little bit more about yourself, your background, where you're at now, how you got there, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, on a personal note, super happy to be here with you. It's been a while. I'm just always happy to see other classmates, man, especially doing the thing. So, personally, born in San Francisco, raised in Oakland, California, West Point grad, econ major. I was an air defender in the Army, and I got out. That was probably, holy smokes, I probably got out now about almost 10 years ago and went to business school. I went to Columbia, focused on finance. I focused on technology because two of the things I really wanted to do. And I came back to the Bay and started my career as a technology investment banker. Covered a bunch of companies, software, hardware, internet, a little bit of fintech. And then I decided, you know what, I really want to get a better understanding of how these companies make strategic decisions that don't involve financial instruments. So I went uh, to Hewlett Packard Enterprise, right, where I was the chief of staff to the COO there, right, and I had an incredible experience learning from them. It was formative to say the least, but extremely tiring but formative. And I had a series of different roles after that with strategy and operations within Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and then Micro Focus, who bought Hewlett Packard Enterprise's software business. And then I decided I wanted to leave there because I want some startup experience, right? And I ended up at ChargePoint, right? They design, manufacture, and sell charging stations for electric vehicles, where I was the chief of staff to the CEO at that point. And it was, you know, talking about a formative experience. Try being with a pre-IPO company, right? Who like is growing precipitously and trying to manage everything in this new esoteric environment where people don't really understand, they're not really established norms. I mean, that was really, really a great experience. And then after that, about 2 years or so of that, I migrated here to Facebook where I do global initiatives, right? And I help senior executives really kind of think through a lot of these thorny problems that affect the company in a holistic way. And when necessary, kind of help drive them home as well from soup to nuts. And that's a little bit about me, right? And what my professional career has kind of been like. And throughout this entire transition, right, from investment banking all the way until me sitting down with you right now, like one of my favorite pastimes, let's say probably one of my passions, is helping vets make the transition from the military to technology, or from the military to business school to technology, and help them kind of understand what that looks like and how to a little bit more effectively, right? So yeah, that's kind of it's kind of a little bit about me.
That
Yeah,
I did not know about the chief of staff roles. Super fascinating. Were you an aide de camp in the military?
I was not, no. So I was a fire control platoon leader in an air defense battery, and then the last job I had in the Army was a admissions officer for West Point, right?
Yeah.
So I literally was there, I think it was about a year and some change, something like that. And that's where I got out of the Army and migrated over to Columbia, or matriculated, excuse me.
H- how'd you pick, or how'd you get into the chief of staff role? Was it business school, or was it the investment banking referrals? How'd that work?
Man, it's fascinating how that works, right? And this actually ties in very well to what we're going to talk about is like the overwhelming majority of opportunities I've gotten have been directly facilitated by other veterans, right?
No.
And it, investment banking, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's not for the weak of heart, right? It's not an 8 to 5 job. Like the banker's 8 to 5 is like 8 a.m. to 5 a.m. as they joke and say. So I'm in the office. It's maybe like 10 or 11 p.m. And one of my veteran mentors pings me and says, "Hey, Jerry, this just came across my desk. You need to throw your name in the hat for this." right? And I had already talked to him about how I was like, I really want to get a more wholesome experience. I don't know how to make that migration. Then literally 30 minutes later, another veteran says, "Hey, this just came across. I think this is a great fit for you." Right.
Same
And
role for both of
same
them?
role for
Yep,
both of them,
yep.
different sources. And then it happened one more time about an hour and a half later. And my
Yeah.
grandma used to say, like, good things come in threes, right? So I said, what, let me throw my name in the hat for this. So and it was interesting because at that point the COO was a West Point grad. He was a veteran himself, right?
Yep.
And he was looking for somebody who could actually, I won't say quote unquote weather the storm, because there was a lot going on at that time at HPE. There was a lot of transition. They'd broken off a few years earlier from HP, so they were a new company in themselves. They were spinning off different parts of the company. Like there was a lot of transition, and it just wasn't an easy time to be there. And he needs somebody who could, weather the long hours, who can take on multiple projects, right? And I threw my name in the hat, and 9 interviews and 3 months later, there I was. And
9 inter oh my, people are complaining nowadays with about, I got my interview, I got 5 interview steps, and it took a whole month, 3 months and 9 interviews. That's insane.
and I mean, it's interesting. Like, and again, goes to another thing, man. Most veterans don't understand the type of scrutiny and diligence that's conducted, right, when you apply to a tech company, period, whether you're a veteran or not, right? They will scrutinize your resume and they will ax you out if they don't like it first. Then, if they get you, they'll put you through a series of different interviews. Some companies have case study interviews, some companies force you to make presentations to them. Like, these are real, like, elements of diligence where if at any point you don't impress somebody, you're out, man. There are thousands of people trying to get in here. So I can understand at that level, you're going to interview after interview after interview after interview. Like, it just is what it is. And it's difficult. It's difficult to get into tech companies, period. Like, I mean, yeah, it sounds like this is like a great, wonderful success story. What I didn't tell you is I had interviewed for a bunch of other roles and just literally got booted over and over and over, probably like 6 or 7 times, right? And I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? Why can I not get this? Right. And and I kind of realized after doing introspection, like later on, I was just kind of out there reaching for different roles at tech companies. I didn't really do a targeted search for what I really wanted, right? I didn't sit down, do the introspection and say, like, hey, what skill sets do I really have? What can I do with those skill sets, right? And then that kind of says, okay, well, what do I want to do? How do I marry those up? And then how do I get there? Right? And that's what's most important for vets to try to sort out. And that requires a whole lot of interpersonal, like, exploration. You really have to sit down and look at yourself and be realistic about what that looks like, right? And it's difficult for somebody coming right out of the army to do that because they don't know what they can do. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do while I was getting out of the army until I learned about, like, business school and everything like that. I'm just like, hey, I want more freedom. I want to be able to make some money and, maybe grow a beard, which, to be fair, I have done. Um, so you really gotta think about it, right? And when I really kind of boil it down, right, I think it kind of comes down to 3 things, right, to help you get to any job for that matter, but especially within. So I would say individual research. I'd say targeted networking,
Yep.
and then I would say probably proper preparation, right? So that research is why I said, like, hey, what can I do? Like, or what is even out there? So are there marketing roles, or engineering roles, or product management roles, or strategy roles, or sales roles, right? There are all these different roles. You go on Facebook, or I'm sorry, Meta, or go on Google or LinkedIn or Netflix or whoever tech company, Microsoft, and look at the different roles that they have. What kind of resonates with you? What do you think you really want to do? And sit back and say, okay, what skill sets do I have? Right? Like, can I do this? Can I not? Right? And like most of the time, you can figure stuff out, but a lot of these companies are looking for people who have done these things before. So sometimes and this leads to the next portion of this, it's the networking portion. Hey, who do I know who works at these companies who does these various things or doesn't and can put me in contact with someone who does so I can have a conversation with them. You'd be surprised what you learn, man. I must have done 40 informational interviews before I landed on investment banking. I'm talking about there were guys who wouldn't even let me sit in front of them without writing them an essay on why I wanted to do investment banking.
Man.
that that was the type of energy they had, man. And I had to rewrite it more than one time to be honest with you too. That was a hell of an experience. But you talk to them, they're like, hey, this is what I do every single day. This is what this looks like. You might like that, you might not. Hey, as a veteran to veteran, like I'll tell you, it took a lot of transition. Maybe you should talk to this person and this person about what they do. That's how you kind of narrow down what a job at a tech company looks like for you, right? And then once you figure out what that looks like, you say, all right, well, how do I get there? Right? You prepare. You take a look at your resume, and obviously there are all these another shortcoming. There's just stereotypes about vets, like on like meme accounts on Instagram and stuff. Oh, they have this 10-page resume and they work for 3 years, type of thing, right? Like, but there's a reason for that. Like you have to have a resume that is targeted, right? That is super deliberate and says, hey, these are the 6 or 7 things that correspond directly with this role that tell you right off the bat that I'm actually a pretty solid fit for this, right? You then have to really understand what the role is, what it looks like, what does the team look like, do the necessary networking, like I said beforehand, but really be prepared to answer questions around, oh, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to work in this role, right? Like, how would you solve this problem? How would you not? How have you done something like this before? Those are really hard questions to answer as a veteran, right? But that preparation is key. And again, when push comes to shove, man, if you don't think this is something you can do on your own, there are tons of programs out there, right? You got like Skill Bridge if you're still in the Army and you have like a commander who supports it, right? You've got shift.org,
Yep.
super holistic experience to help you get through. You've got Breakline Tech, they help vets out as well. Like there are a bunch of different organizations that could kind of help you migrate through this process and kind of do the self-discovery, do the preparation, kind of facilitate the networking and kind of smooth the path a little bit. But even if they do, if you want to work in tech, be prepared for the long haul, man, because it very rarely just falls in your lap.
Yep.
We're going to pause right here because we've hit our video length for YouTube. So catch the rest of this conversation over on part 2. See you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. I want to add in or summarize a couple things that I think you said that were either new to me or like I just got a foot stomp. The one is that at Gartner or into all of our internal interviews, the first thing you do is it's called reflective competence. It is thinking about what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, and how is it relevant to the role you're applying for. So it's like they want you to think about, are you a good fit for this? Okay, you were successful where you're currently at, the role you're going into, how do your strengths fit for that? So that whole very introspective thinking about what you want to do with your life, really important for internal moves or going outside the company. One of the thing I did when I was getting out was, and this should be helpful for any veteran that's kind of doing this for the first time, is create a mission statement. Like everyone knows what that is. So the who, what, when, where, why. The who, don't forget your family, don't forget your kids and your spouse, because if your spouse is not on board for investment banker hours, then
Yeah.
you're not going to last long. If your kids, kids are in high school. I was talking to a guy earlier this week. His kids are in high school, so he's like geographically limited. He is not going to move his kids away from their high school while he's getting out of the military because he just doesn't want to do that to his family. So that kind of goes into the who. Like, are you okay traveling? Do you want to do remote work? Do you want to work from home? And then probably the biggest thing is the why. What are you passionate about? So like finding that sweet spot. So you're passionate about tech and finance. So same here, obviously. Tech and mine's like national security, like I overlapping technology and politics and national security. It's like find that sweet spot in the industry and go after everything you talked about was like networking is super important. You got recommended for the same role by three different people tells me either intentionally or not, your networking was good. You had a brand of people that knew you. You had this personal and professional brand that said, Jerry's a great fit for this chief of staff role. Once you get into a company, your brand within a company, it's really just a reputation, but your reputation precedes you so that before you even started the interview process, people saw you as a good fit for that role.
I think networking is probably the number one thing that the Army fails to prepare you for in the private sector.
Yep.
Like most of the time, it's say, hey, go here, do this. This is where you're going to be. This is what you got to do. You do a good job. They look down at your OER, NCOER, whatever, and they say, okay, this guy's pretty solid. Move him on, right? Or you have, you like it's different than deliberately forming these relationships with your commander or your platoon leader or platoon sergeant, and then you know like pretty regularly saying, hey, like this is what I want to do. This is where I see myself, making sure that they have in the back of their mind, hey, Jerry or Josh, they really want to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So when that comes up, right, they know to push it your way, right? That's a difficult thing to do, especially in the Army, again, because they don't push it. But it's important, right? And the reason why people did this is because I have this thing, like I always work super hard for people, right? I always try to treat them as best as possible. And even when I leave an organization, I always try to leave that organization with people having a great taste in their mouth because the world's too small. You never know who you work with again, right?
Yep.
And it's always important to have that type of relationship with people because, again, whether people are starting a company or they're standing up a team, finding great talent's not an easy thing to do. And people fall into habits of working with people that they worked with beforehand. So they will give you the call, right?
Yep.
So it's really important to just continue, like give people calls if you haven't talked to them in a while, ping them. And if they got out the Army, they're doing something that you really love, ping them and say, hey, congrats on that, man. That's really good. Would love to stay in touch, right? I'm really looking to do something like that. Can I talk to you about it? Like actively doing that is important, right? And if you don't give enough credence, if you don't give enough energy to that, then you're going to find yourself reaching out to people only when you need stuff, and
Mm.
that's very difficult to get things done when you'd have to do it that way.
Yeah. So one thing that was really helpful for me getting out was I ended up getting someone at Gartner coached me through my initial interview process. Did you have a coach?
It's fascinating that you say that. I've had endless coaches, but formal and informal. So let me talk about formal first. I was in a program called MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, right? Which helps, right? Young minorities, some veterans get part of that too, right? Kind of migrate from their current career into a business school, right? And that really, really helped me kind of structure the way that I spoke, structure my story, understand my passion, really know which direction I want to go, and be able to articulate that to people in a cogent and very clear way, right? And like my coach through that program, she was just incredible, and she would tell me straight up, Jerry, that is not it, right? We need to recock this. Like you need to
Yep.
think about these elements of your story and how you want to incorporate them. Hey, look at your resume. How do you want to incorporate some of those bullets into what you're telling people? Like, why is that story even pertinent to this specific role, right? And
Yep.
that's the experience I had from a formal standpoint. I also had the same experience through the Towigo Foundation, right? Who does something similar, but specifically for people who want to go into finance. Now, informally, I had a bunch of mentors from West Point. Just some of them were classmates, some of them had graduated years earlier, right? And just I would ping them and say, hey, I want to do what you're doing, right? How do I do that? Or this is what I want to do. Here's my resume. And they would chew my resume up. They would be like, what the hell, man? Like, this is not it. Like I would get on the phone and these guys really took an interest, right? These are more, I would say, mentors and even coaches. They would spend an hour and a half on the phone with me, helping me craft the way that I present myself and my story, right? Not everybody's going to have that, right? And you have to be able to kind of take direction and run with it on your own. But again, like having these relationships, man, especially with guys who get out and move on, is important. If you see a vet doing something that you want to do, whether it's on LinkedIn or otherwise, reach out and ask them, right? Veterans help veterans. I know I do, right? When veterans reach out to me, I almost always ping them back. Sometimes I just completely forget because bonkers sometimes in the head, but like,
Yep.
man, I try to help veterans because I want veterans to help me. Like, look, like regardless of whether or not you did 4 or 5 tours in Iraq or Afghanistan, right? Or you didn't, right? Or you got in just so you can get into college and then got out. You still served, right? And that means something. That means we have some type of collective experience. So I'm going to do my best to help you, or at least drive you toward a person that can. And I would hope that you do the same thing, man. It's supposed to be like a family like that. Otherwise, I mean, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you never know. You never know what type of coaching, what type of mentoring you're going to get. Because again, a lot of times veterans are willing to help veterans.
Yep. Absolutely. The example I have of the benefit of having that informal coach, when I got to like the final stage of the interview process, the hiring manager, Steph Blower, she said, the language you're using, it sounds like you already work here. And I only knew the phrases or the words to use because of that person that was inside Gartner coaching me the entire way. So if you can, again, found that through networking. Didn't know the person 6 months earlier, got introduced by, it wasn't even a veteran. So it is just to have as many of those conversations as possible. We've talked a lot about all the good things you should be doing. Any recommendations on things to avoid, missteps that veterans can make trying to get into tech?
Yeah, I say first and foremost, and I can't stress this enough, man. Most veterans don't make it past the initial screening. It doesn't matter what technology company in particular they're applying for. Like veterans need to understand, like most people don't care about the overwhelming majority of their certifications, right? They can't understand their resume when they read it, right? And it's important, especially for veterans, to make sure that they adapt their language to the civilian style, right? Because people speak differently in the private sector. Like all these Army acronyms are foreign to them. So it'll be difficult for them to properly place you, right? So that's number one, really, because you're most of the time, the first thing people do is like they'll look at your resume. If you could find somebody too, like you did, that can help coach you through that process, right? That works there currently, or that can refer you internally, right? That's always a better way to go because I've noticed, man, there's just so many resumes, man, so many applicants. I also want to say, I just really want to drive home understanding why you want to work at a place and what you want to do, right? And really, really having an understanding, again, the interpersonal understanding of whether or not you're a good fit for that. A lot of these companies only want to hire people who can hit the ground running. They don't want to go through the training process, right? So make sure you're a good fit. Going hand in hand with that, though, is the overwhelming majority of these big tech companies, right? They've got these veteran type transition type programs, right? Oh, you're a veteran. Okay, well, go through our rotational program or rotational leadership program, whatever it looks like, right? And they kind of place you after that, or they place you in a place and kind of help you with that transition. I highly recommend that veterans go through that process. If they look at a company like, I have no freaking idea what I want to do here, much better, much easier to go through that and find your place in the company than just float around and have no type of direction. Last, I'll say this, man. If you sat down and you were going to write a page on what you're doing and what your life looks like 20 years from now, right? And then work that back to today, right? The question is, how would you get there? What would that look like? What would that journey look like? Right? It's important to think about that. Not just, I'm just going to work in tech and it's going to be great. Well, okay, well, why? Like, what do you plan on doing with this? Do you want to start a tech company eventually? Do you want to see yourself working for Meta like forever, right? In one specific role? Do you want to have progressive increases in responsibility and leadership, right? Like, do you want to be a thought leader in one specific area? What do you want to do long term that kind of helps you craft what it is you want your career to look like in the short and medium term, right? And if you don't think about that, then the worst thing could possibly happen is 5, 10 years down the road, you're like, oh man, I really went the wrong direction. I went the wrong
Yeah.
direction. That is a hard pivot, right? So I
Yeah.
say those are probably some of the major shortcomings I've seen, right? Just in general, but also specifically with veterans.
I want to build on one of the last points you made of backwards planning your life. Where are you going to be 20 years from now? The career, the job you have isn't the only stepping stone to get where you want to be in 20 years. There's hobbies, there's stuff you could do on the side, like side hustles, there's nonprofits, volunteering work. All of these things, if they align with where you want to be in 20 years, can help you get there. Do things on the side in addition to whatever job. Find the best job that will help you get there. But if there's something missing from that, fill it in with a side hustle or certifications on the side or volunteer work, stuff like that can fill in the gap and give you work experience, help you build your network, all that stuff, so that you can combine your career, your job, and that side hustle or that hobby, that volunteer work, and eventually you combine those two into like the best thing you could ever do with your life. But I would say a mistake I see is them trying to replace the army one for one with their career. They're trying to replace that esprit de corps, that team camaraderie. They're trying to replace like the PT, the relationships they get from the FRG and all that stuff. They're trying to take the Army and everything that's great about it and replace it one for one with a civilian company, and it's just not going to happen.
Right. And I just want to say too, right, just holistically, if you are a veteran, listen to us talk right now, right? And you're like, okay, I got all this info. I'm thinking about getting out. What do I do? Veteran or active duty on getting ready to ETS? Do the introspection first, man. Sit down, figure out what you want your life to look like, where you want to be, how you want that to look, how much money do you want to make, right? Like, think about that first, right? And then say, okay, now let me take a look at the professional side of this, right? Like, do that first. Like, I am lucky to still be married to my wonderful wife after investment banking because that was a struggle. I don't know how she just rolled with it like a champion, but she sure did. But that's a hard life if you don't, like you really need to think about what you want to do. It just makes the transition so much easier because you are over rotating. You are first anchoring on that family life, on that lifestyle, and the stuff that at the core is really important, right? Probably more important than the rest of it, because the rest of it, most of the time, will kind of help support, right?
Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, 100%. And again, veterans know how to do this. They just call it a different name. For officers, it's the MDMP. The first thing you do is mission analysis. What are my options? What do I want to do? Don't start developing a COA without analyzing your current situation. The OODA loop. The first thing you do is observe and orient. All right, who am I? What are my strengths? What do I want to do? And then think about deciding and acting on it. So don't just start, I'm getting out, gotta apply. So yeah, 100%. All right. Well, I've kept you for 40 minutes on a Saturday morning. You got a newborn baby in the next. I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask you that we didn't even get to. So I'll probably chat with you again in a couple months. I appreciate your time, Jerry. Any other closing thoughts or closing comments before I let you go?
No, all I have to say, man, is like, it's not impossible. Daunting, but not impossible. Tons of vets work in tech, right? You can get there. Just fight the good fight and keep your head up. It
Yeah.
just takes time.
All right, Jerry. I appreciate it. Have a good one and enjoy your weekend.
Cheers, man.
See ya. Hey, this is Josh McCarver. I'm starting recording a conversations